that we're going to be reading together and going over today. Before we got into it, just recently, as people in the meeting were describing their experiences in miraculous moments, they described the feeling was so different than anything that they were familiar with. And I suggested the word surreal had been used by other people. And I looked up the definition of surreal, and it said as a mixture of fantasy and fact and fantasy. And I didn't really care for that connotation of fantasy. So I have another word that I'm totally outside the Course in Miracles here, to describe those moments where you just are unlike anything else. And I'm open for ideas here and suggestions. Otherworldly is the word that I came up with the other day. So that's my favorite word for describing those. They're not magical moments. We'll go over magic today. They are moments that are touched by spirit. And it's true, we need to develop a new language for describing these things. Heather, you have a comment?
No, that was a thumbs up.
Oh, thumbs up. Okay, great. All right, so we will be talking about magic today, and along with a number of other things as we go over chapter 7.5, healing and the changelessness of mind. And I want to thank, let's see, today is Sunday. And so Julie is reading today. Thank you, Julie, for reading. If you're ready, when you are.
The body is nothing more than a framework for developing ability, which is quite apart from what they're used for. That is a decision. The effects of the ego's decision in this matter are so apparent that they need no elaboration. But the Holy Spirit's decision to use the body only for communication has such a direct connection with healing that it does need clarification. The unhealed healer obviously does not understand his own vocation.
Wow, so there's all these ideas right out in the front. They're not terribly complex, though. So remember that the Holy Spirit has a goal of truth for all of us here, now, and she sees our life in terms of fulfilling this goal of truth, which was to bring your consciousness back home to a state of peace and union. And in that respect, the body has a role to play in that, according to the Holy Spirit's purpose. And that is so that you would develop abilities in the physical world that you could use towards the purposes of healing. And if you were with us yesterday, we went over some of those abilities that we talked about, like the ability to forgive others and forgive yourself, the ability to remain at peace even when outward circumstances become chaotic, the ability to rest in your inner being and be helpful to people in the world. So the body has a role to play in the Holy Spirit's plan. She sees it as she is committed to, it says the Holy Spirit's decision to use the body only for communication. So for today's session, this is a central idea that the Holy Spirit has decided that in her goal of truth for our lives, that the body will be used for communication. Okay, so that's just her purpose that she gives to the body. And that has a connection to healing, which, as it says, does need clarification. We're going to clarify that as we read on today, how the role of the body being used for communication has a role in healing. That'll be clarified. And then there's this remark here that is, first time this was mentioned, is the unhealed healer who does not understand the nature of her vocation of healing. This is the unhealed healer. And they'll make reference to this again a number of times. It's not defined, so you have to inquire of yourself, what does it mean to be a healer who is unhealed himself? The unhealed healer does not understand his own vocation. All right, so, and then raises question marks, right? Makes you say, well, tell us, let's read on. Julie, you're muted.
Only minds communicate. Since the ego cannot obliterate the impulse to communicate, because it is also the impulse to create, it can only teach you that the body can both communicate and create, and therefore does not need the mind. The ego thus tries to teach you that the body can act like the mind and is therefore self-sufficient. Yet we have learned that behavior is not the level for either teaching or learning, since you can act in accordance with what you do not believe. To do this, however, will weaken you as a teacher and a learner, because, as has been repeatedly emphasized, you teach what you do believe. An inconsistent lesson will be poorly taught and poorly learned. If you teach both sickness and healing, you are both a poor teacher and a poor learner.
So we have more elaboration on the idea of an unhealed healer is teaching inconsistent lessons, teaching both sickness and healing, which results in being a poor teacher as well as a poor learner. So an unhealed healer, by definition, is split between two very different narratives, and then in their role in this world teaches those inconsistencies. So that would be a sign of a problem. That would be a sign of a need for healing. So there's a bunch of shifts that go on in this paragraph I want to point out to you. So the first line, only minds communicate, this could be thought of as a universal law of mind, applies to everywhere and everyone throughout all time. Truth. Then it shifts and says, and it goes into the ego, an explanation of what the ego attempts to create an alternative narrative from the one that the Holy Spirit teaches. Remember, the Holy Spirit has decided that the body be used only for communication. Well, the ego is going to create an alternative narrative. about the body and try to seduce your mind into believing that alternative narrative, and thus have your mind pitted against the Holy Spirit. And so it tries to teach that there are powers within the body, that the body can communicate, and that it can create, and that it doesn't need the mind. So the truth is that only minds communicate. The ego teaches that you don't need the mind to communicate. You can use the body to communicate. It's a level confusion. It's a perfect example of level confusion. The mind is what does the communication. The ego says, no, the body is capable of communicating. It doesn't need the mind. So that creates a split. And that's what that split results in the inconsistencies that appear in all of us at one point or another, including the unhealed healer. An inconsistency, two narratives running at the same time results in both poor teaching as well as poor learning. Heidi?
So I have a question. If I just came over about a sickness, so because I was sick, does that mean that my conscious contact with the Holy Spirit has been full of shit, or I would have never got sick?
No, I don't find that in A Course of Miracles. I don't find that to be consistent. It does not mean that. When we refer, when the Course is concerned with the healing of the mind, the focus
Correct.
here is to bring all individuals to a state of inner peace. That can happen. And so that's the primary focus of this course. The body then becomes secondary or a tool to aid in the primary purpose, the healing of the mind. And so this gets into the arena of level confusion between the purpose of the body and the purpose of the mind, which is too big for us to unwind completely here, but we can take it up in detail at another time. So no, Heidi, physical sickness is not a sign of you're not guilty for not having participated properly with the Holy Spirit. I don't find anything in A Course in Miracles that teaches that. That's a different level. Richard?
Okay.
I'm sorry. One thing that I noticed, and we're talking about something that has affected me now, is that it's the letting go of old ideas has run me down emotionally. But that's only a temporary state. What I need to do, the prescription for that is to get back into the work. You had mentioned a word earlier, Jonica, and the word was surrealistic.
Surreal.
And I believe
Surreal.
surreal. Yeah. And I believe for me, that it's almost like a spiritual utopia when I give. It's perfect, and there's no word can explain that other than it's right, and it's between me and whatever created me. It's just a beautiful state. And then my ego may enter and say, well, if you give, remember, you're going to need that money later. Where are you going to get it? The ego tries to interfere because it's been unseated for me.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I'm just kind of backtracking to something that
Right.
was said earlier.
Right, right.
I did have a physical poverty mentality. And when I gave, it really shook me. And now it's a lot easier, but it was working through that
Mhm.
and running me down emotionally, where I would get, skin ailments and whatnot physically. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on here. I did want to point out one more thing here, which will be touched on a number of times again, and I think is really central factor in anyone's progress through this program. And that is starting from the inconsistent level where you act in accordance with what you do not believe. Therefore, this is inner conflict. This is a great example of inner conflict. You believe one thing, but you act in accordance with something else. So therefore, your split in your behaviors are not reflecting of your heart and your soul and your beliefs. This is ego would love for that to continue on for a long, long time. As you progress through this course, you learn that that is a form of sickness, acting according to what you do not believe. And there is a form of correction for that. And we're not covering it in detail today, but we will go over this in the future, is aligning your inner beliefs with your outward behaviors. So, which is a shift from inconsistency to consistency. Why is this important? Because as long as you're split like that, it weakens you, your abilities to serve. Your function as a healer will be impaired if you're acting according to what you do not believe. So we need to learn to correct that, which is what brings us to the next paragraph.
Healing is the one ability that everyone can develop and must develop if he is to be healed. Healing is the Holy Spirit's form of communication in this world, and the only one he accepts. He recognizes no other because he does not accept the ego's confusion of mind and body. Minds can communicate, but they cannot hurt. The body in the service of the ego can hurt other bodies, but this cannot occur unless the body has already been confused with the mind. This situation, too, can be used for healing or for magic, but you must remember that magic always involves the belief that healing is harmful. This belief is its totally insane premise, and so it proceeds accordingly.
Mm-hmm. So here's another central principle. Healing, this is the Holy Spirit's agenda. Healing is the one ability everyone can develop and must develop if he is to be healed. I think the instructions to the miracle worker are clear. You must develop this ability to heal. It's there for you. The Holy Spirit is your guide in this, but it won't happen unless you develop it. You have to be willing to participate, be a partner in this developmental program of learning how to heal yourself and in the process to heal others. So central, the Course in Miracles teaches that this is our function here in this world, is to learn to heal ourselves and to heal others. And if you're honest, you look around at the world, you realize the need is great. This is the right program, is to learn to heal the conflicted mind, the insanity and the chaos of the world, to learn to heal that mind, and all the other attributes that would come along with an improved, transformed world will extend out of that healing. Noel?
If I am still unhealed, can I heal?
Thank you for the question. The way so let's talk about multiple levels. The truly healed individual certainly is teaching healing and practicing healing and helping other people to heal, right? So there's no doubt about that. That's in the ideal situation. Then we have, in the other extreme, the unhealed healer is a person who's confused and split and inconsistent and is both a poor learner and a poor teacher. So they're not able to heal. Now let's talk about what we might call the middle ground. And this gets tricky here because we're talking about shades of gray. And my understanding is that a person practicing this program, sincerely asking for guidance of the Holy Spirit, will have moments of clarity. This doesn't to say they're clear all day long, have moments of clarity where they are willing to be in service of the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit will express through them in that moment. That's not to say that they don't still have work to do, but in that moment, they are devoted to the Holy Spirit's agenda, and they can help others to heal. So that's a yes to your question, but bounded by, this is not a person that's into it to exalt their ego. This is a person who in that moment has set aside their own self-centered narrative about grief and anguish, has set that aside. And in that moment, they experience a holy instant and a miracle occurs. Yeah.
Isn't the term unhealed healer contradiction in terms then?
It is. So let me just kind of, you probably have encountered in this world people who will tell you they are healers. All right, so this is a person whose persona or whose public image is that I can heal you. And we're going to read about this more in tonight's material. I can heal you, and they will claim to have powers of healing that reside within themselves, and that they are uniquely gifted for this purpose. And yet they are internally very conflicted and confused about their own vocation. And so that would be an extreme version of the unhealed healer. And there are probably more moderate versions as well. But we don't want to focus on all the variations here. Heather?
Yeah, I like the question. It comes to me that we can teach what we've healed, and there's parts of us that are healed and the parts of us that aren't. And so can be teachers in the parts that we're healed. And then the other parts of us that are not healed, that need to be healed, will continue to heal. And then we can teach in those parts as well. I don't think it's all or nothing. I think that's why it is consistent, that it's the unhealed healer, it's unhealed parts of the healer. And so when those parts of me heal, then I can teach those parts as well. But certain parts of me are healed, so I can teach to that level. But I can't teach to the parts that aren't completely healed yet. But eventually I will be able to, if I can integrate those parts.
That's a very helpful distinction, Heather. Thank you. More to be included in today's. So we want to understand the unhealed healer, not to embrace it or to sit in judgment, but to realize that it's a confused mental state, and all of us, therefore, could potentially fall into that confused state. And so this is a program about correcting those kind of errors by recognizing them. And when they do pass across our life, our consciousness, to notice, oh, that's an unhealed healer concept, I'm offering that to the Holy Spirit. So we just in this paragraph we just read, where they're talking about confusion, the situation can be used for healing or for magic. But you must remember, magic always involves the belief that healing is harmful. So magic is a major theme in the Course of Miracles, and it will come up several dozen times again in other places of the Course. I want to spend a few moments summarizing in my own way what magic is. It won't do complete justice. And mind you, we mean magic as used within A Course of Miracles, not as used on stage for illusions and things like that, as used within A Course of Miracles. What is it? Well, first of all, what is the truth? Miracles teaches the healing of our minds occurs by correcting it at the root, at the central cause of the thought disorder, which is a confusion about what you are and your relationship to creation, totality, correcting that mental confusion, not knowing your own being. And that the Holy Spirit is our guide into that healing of our mind, correcting our mind. In contrast, the ego wants you to believe in other approaches to life, wants you to believe in illusions, wants you to identify the core of your being as in the flesh, in the body, and then have you obsess, this is my word, obsess over your special problems of your body, make them your central narrative, and then trust in magical powers to bring about the healing of those problems. Now, what do we mean by magical powers? Remember, this is an ego notion. It's putting your faith and trust in powers. And by the way, magic, we put our faith in magical powers because we believe they work. It's a false belief system. And it always involves level confusion. It always sees the problem as originating in the body, not in the mind. And therefore, looks for body solutions to mental disorders. For example, if I feel miserable, my state of mind, I'm depressed, and I convince myself if I only had more money, I would be happy. So now we've got a depression, a state of mind, but we're going to go out into the world and get a physical solution, money, in order to change our mental state. That's a level confusion. You can't heal the mind with the solutions for the body, for the physical level. And there are many additional forms of that level confusion and using magic that comes about. Our goal here isn't to list the hundreds of ways in which that shows up, but there are many. Whereas the opposite of magic is to put your faith and trust in the Holy Spirit's guidance to heal your mind. That is not magic. That's the inverse. And thus realize that you yourself have been confused about even what's important in life, confused about life, love, confused about yourself. And therefore, you cannot guide yourself forward. You need to partner with the Holy Spirit for guidance. This is what this program is all about. And there's a workbook lesson, let me recognize the problem so it can be solved, because I had no idea what the real problem was. I thought it had to do with my physical body and its imperfection and its issues, and that's not the problem at all. The problem is a separate mind state. So magic is an error, a teaching of the ego that will say you can fix everything with these solutions in the physical world. We will cover this again later on because as I said, it's a major theme. Let's go on.
Healing only strengthens. Magic always tries to weaken. Healing perceives nothing in the healer that everyone else does not share with him. Magic always sees something special in the healer, which he believes he can offer as a gift to someone who does not have it. He may believe that the gift comes from God to him, but it is quite evident that he does not understand God if he thinks he has something that others lack.
Mm-hmm. So the unhealed healer does not recognize perfect equality. The unhealed healer views themselves as special, having a special gift, and that others lack that gift. And therefore, the unhealed healer believes that he's giving something unique to others. That would be the unhealed healer. In contrast, the Holy Spirit says healing exists within every one of us. The power to change your mind is something that cannot be taken away from you. It exists within all of us, and that there's nothing anyone can give you. They can remind you of it, communicate to you about it, bring your awareness of it, but they can't give you something you've already got. And so we are all on an equal playing field with respect to our ability to heal and in our possession of the fundamental ingredients necessary for healing. Everyone has the guidance of the Holy Spirit available to them, but not everyone utilizes it. So healing, true healing, perceives nothing in the healer that everyone else does not share. with him. And so in a teaching learning situation, an example would be that the teacher does not exalt himself. He sees others, learners, as equal, and that we're all on a learning journey, developing our abilities to heal. This is referring to what we said earlier, that the body is a means for developing abilities to heal and to help others to heal. Is this making sense? I know that it's very different from what conventional or traditional teachings may have offered about magic and healing. Heather?
Yeah, the second sentence, healing perceives nothing in the healer that everyone else does not share with him. That really is the crux of the 12-step programs, which is why they're so effective, is because everyone in there is healing, and there's nobody that, and the people that understand that the healing entails, everybody shares that. So that it's not like, there's one person coming in that's going to tell everybody how to heal. Everybody's in there to heal. And so it's incredibly, I think it's a really good example of what this is talking about.
Thank you. Sandra?
Yeah, I love that the course is based in equanimity, that we all have access if we want it. The other thing is at another meeting, we talked about the personal self and the egoic self. And the personal self is the one that's in process of calling on the Holy Spirit. But, when I call on the Holy Spirit, and I do that a lot because I catch myself judging a lot. And every time I catch myself judging, I'm calling on the Holy Spirit to show me the truth, because the judgment just makes me feel alone and isolated. It doesn't make me feel good at all. I was under the illusion that it would protect me, but it doesn't. It just makes me feel alone and isolated. But the personal self is the part that's in process of calling on the Holy Spirit. And, part of me calling on the Holy Spirit is for me to trust that the Holy Spirit will work, not necessarily in my timing, which has required that I let go of time, which is great because there is no time in God's world. And, it's the personal self is not the ego. It's the part of me that's in process and integrating. I'm in process of integrating this information. So it's not like I'm just thinking I know it all. It's a humbling experience. I'm complete.
I need to move on. We've got a lot of material tonight, so we'll swing back and take some additional comments after the next paragraph.
The Holy Spirit does not work by chance, and healing that is out of him always, and healing that is of him always works. Unless the healer always heals by him, the results will vary. Yet healing itself is consistent, since only consistency is conflict-free, and only the conflict-free are whole. By accepting exceptions and acknowledging that he can sometimes heal and sometimes not, the healer is obviously accepting inconsistency. He is therefore in conflict and is teaching conflict. Can anything of God not be for all and for always? Love is incapable of any exceptions. Only if there is fear does the idea of exceptions seem to be meaningful. Exceptions are fearful because they are made by fear. The fearful healer is a contradiction in terms, and is therefore a concept that only a conflicted mind could possibly perceive as meaningful.
So here we have another term for the unhealed healer, the fearful healer. It is a contradiction in terms. A few moments ago, Noel asked about the ability to heal even when one is not completely healed, and we had a really nice discussion around all that. But there are nuances that are further elaborated on here. So we're talking about someone who still has unhealed parts of themselves and is not free of conflict. And it says the results will vary, meaning sometimes healing will occur, but if the healer is not healing by the Holy Spirit, we mentioned this before, if the healer is not being guided by the Holy Spirit in an effort to heal, results will vary. Sometimes heal and sometimes not. That would be an example of inconsistency. And this is elaborated on in other places, Noel and others, as the healer who is not guided by the Holy Spirit may temporarily be helpful to the other individual, but not permanently remove the confusion, the cause of confusion in the mind of the other person. Whereas the Holy Spirit's healing has lasting effect. So results will vary. And not be of a lasting nature. So the individual that serves in that role is still in conflict and is teaching conflict, sometimes heal, sometimes not. This is not the state that we would want for people to be in, but as the question implied, many times you encounter people like that. And, I don't claim to be completely healed myself. And so my teachings are not going to be perfectly consistent and always of the Holy Spirit. That's just nature of being on a journey together. So, but what we can do before we're completely healed is overcome the fear in our mind. And that makes for a significant improvement in our ability to hear the Holy Spirit and be guided by her voice, by her guidance. Susie?
Yeah, I just wanted to, what comes up for me is the years that I was in therapy with somebody that wasn't following any guidance from the Holy Spirit. And I'm not saying anything one way or another about that profession or anything. I'm only talking about my personal experience. That my healing was extremely inconsistent, lots of magic. Let's try this antidepressant. Let's try this, and let's run a 5K, all kinds of things like that. But having said all that, my real healing has come only through the Holy Spirit and the laws of God and all of that. My only true lasting healing. And for me, this is really speaks to the unhealed healer in my personal life and in my journey. So yeah, like I always say now, I don't think I could ever be in any kind of healing situation with somebody that doesn't bring the Holy Spirit into the room. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Very powerful. So we're talking about the unhealed healer as if they were someone else. Let's make it personal for a minute now. We're talking about everyone on this program. What is the unhealed healer? It's a person who still is not completely healed and has inconsistencies, inner conflicts. That's why we're all here. That's why we're doing the program. We are all unhealed healers until we reach that upper strata of innocence, total forgiveness, totally willing to be guided by the Holy Spirit. And then it becomes obvious that that individual is completely healed because of the miracles that emanate from that state. So we're not talking about somebody else here. We're talking about ourselves. And what we just did is we made it a personal story. Every page in A Course of Miracles is about that. None of this is talking about them, what they have problems with being unhealed healer. Let's look at their problems. Every page is talking about our own journey and whether we're right in the middle of it now, or it's mostly ahead of us, or largely behind us. We have walked in those shoes. We know from personal experience what it's like. And so every page is about our journey, the journey we share together. Heather?
Yeah, I love the clarity in this paragraph because it really makes it very easy for me to see where I'm unhealed. And the unhealed part of me is the part says love is incapable of any exceptions. So the part of me that isn't healed is the part of me that still has exceptions or still has a separation and sees some people as this, some people as that. So any part of me that sees exceptions is the part of me that's not healed.
Mm-hmm. And that includes anytime you identify a sickness in another and think that you're an exception, that I'm an exception. They're sick, but not me. That's an exception. And that in itself, as it says, only if there's fear does the idea of exceptions seem to be meaningful. It's an example right there of fear.
Exceptions always separate.
They do. They always do. They're the antithesis of perfect equality. Noel?
Extending from what Heather was just saying, I know I'm unhealed in many, many ways. And yet, sometimes when I see someone obviously ill in some way, my impetus nowadays is to send them love, is to see them whole, is to keep their holiness in mind. And sometimes I might even say something to them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I guess, an example too of what you were saying of the middle ground. You can
Mm-hmm.
still have those impetuses. That's
Mm-hmm.
a word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so true. As a matter of fact, many times the way I've experienced it, and all this might occur within seconds, I see someone, a judgment flashes across my mind about their being sick, And then a second later, I realized, oh, I was that way not so long. I remember what it's like. I see myself. I'm seeing myself in the other person. Maybe not the way I'm experiencing myself in this very moment, but certainly I'm seeing part of myself. And then all of a sudden, there are no exceptions. We're all in this healing journey together. All right, we're going to go on.
Fear does not gladden. Healing does. Fear always makes exceptions. Healing never does. Fear produces dissociation because it induces separation. Healing always produces harmony because it proceeds from integration. It is predictable because it can be counted on. Everything that is of God can be counted on because everything of God is wholly real. Healing can be counted on because it is inspired by His voice and in accordance with His laws. Yet, if healing is inconsistent, it cannot be inconsistently understood. Understanding means consistency because God means consistency. Since that is His meaning, it is also yours. Your meaning cannot be out of accord with His because your whole meaning and your only meaning comes from His and is like His. God cannot be out of accord with Himself, and you cannot be out of accord with Him. You cannot separate yourself from your Creator, who created you by sharing His being with you.
So the whole illusion of separation can be described as a form of dissociating your mind from the one mind of creation. It's a form of, I've got my own private mind, my own private agenda, my own self-defined narrative. And in that narrative, and this goes into complete insanity, I'm going to decide the nature of truth and reality and of my being. In contrast with that, the truth that we learn in the Course of Miracles is that we cannot be out of accord with our source. We are extensions of the source. This is actually scientific. There's a source, and as it extends outward, there are effects of it. We are the effects of our source, and we cannot be out of accord with our source. We cannot be separate because we share our being with our source. And as a result, here's the meaning of your life. As a result of what we just said, your being is shared with the source of all creation. The meaning of your life cannot be separate from the meaning that God gave it. And for just parting a little for a second out of A Course in Miracles, philosophers have spent thousands of years in libraries full of books discussing the meaning of life. And the simple, and it gets very complex, all complexity galore. You need a PhD in philosophy to follow it all. But the simple truth is that the whole meaning of your life and your only meaning comes from the meaning of your source. Your source had a plan and a purpose for you, and that's where the meaning of your life comes from. Any effort to separate from that and make up a different narrative about yourself is delusional. It can't work. So, fear produces dissociate, but yet in the fearful state, it will seem as though all that craziness makes sense, because fear does produce dissociation. It induces separation. Let's see, I'm going to make one more point that's a departure from what I just said there. Earlier, we were talking about the moment when an unhealed healer is in a state of mind that they are fully desirous, choosing to be guided by spirit. And we said in that moment, a holy instant can occur, a miracle can happen, and healing can occur. Well, an aspect of that is why can it occur there? Because it produces a type of harmony where the person offering the healing is in a harmonious state of consciousness, harmonious with spirit and with the other person, who recognizes perfect equality. And so the healing in that moment proceeds from a state of integration, a state of oneness with the plans and purposes of spirit. And that's why healing happens, is because of its source is from an integrated state of oneness. Brian, you had your hand up, but you're on mute. I don't know if, go ahead, Brian. We can't hear you. All right. We'll come back. We're having some audio problems. We can't hear you, Brian. It might be that your microphone level is needs to be adjusted. Sorry about that. Okay, so the meaning of life cannot be divorced from source. Your whole meaning, your only meaning, comes from the source of all creation. To believe otherwise is to separate from the Creator and an attempt to devise a different meaning. That would be a form of dissociation and dissociation and separation. That attempt to dissociate and separate has grabbed the attention of a number of philosophers that were significant in the 19th and 20th century. Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Freud, Camus, Sartre, Dostoevsky, many of the materials that I had to read in high school were out of that school of existential despair. And so this became, in the particularly after the devastations of World War II, the idea of a despairing outlook, a meaningless life, took strong root in the popular mindset and is expressed by certain artists as an absurd approach to life. It's that life is absurd and without meaning and purpose. And so you have people dressed in three-piece suits with their briefcases while they're standing in the ocean with an umbrella. It's a form of absurdity. And so that became the predominant philosophic view of the 20th century. And so beware that that is what is being taught in the world, is a sense of nihilistic meaninglessness and emptiness. Fear results in disassociation from the source and a sense of separation. Okay, we'll go on.
The unhealed healer wants gratitude from his brothers, but he is not grateful to them. That is because he thinks he is giving something to them and is not receiving something equally desirable in return. His teaching is limited because he is learning so little. His healing lesson is limited by his own ingratitude, which is a lesson in sickness. True learning is constant and so vital in its power for change that a son of God can recognize his power in one instant and change the world in the next. That is because by changing his mind, he has changed the most powerful device that was ever given him for change. This in no way contradicts the changelessness of mind as God created it. But you think you have changed it as long as you learn through the ego. This places you in a position of needing to learn a lesson that seems contradictory. You must learn to change your mind about your mind. Only by this can you learn that it is changeless.
All right, well, we got some talking to do through here, unpacking to do, because we've got two things that are being talked about in the same paragraph. One is the changelessness of your mind, and the other is the power to change your mind. And a lot of people would say, well, tell me which one it is. It's one or the other. Would they not? Is it changeless? Or does it need to be changed? Well, it depends on your perspective. So from the eternal ultimate state, the mind of creation is perfect, was perfect, is perfect, always will be perfect, need not change. Your higher mind is part of the changeless mind of creation, the one mind of all creation. It is changeless. However, when we enter into this time-space matrix and ego confusion, part of our mind dissociates from the one mind and starts telling a different story about pain and suffering and anguish and despair and loss. And that part of the mind needs to change and has the ability to change because of the power. God gave you the power to change your mind, and nothing in all the universe can remove that. So it's the most powerful device that was ever given you for change. And so we've got, therefore, this split mind concept of the Course of Miracles, the one holy mind, which is your higher mind and is actually where your true self resides, in your holy higher mind, which is at perfect peace. It's only that portion of the mind which is preoccupied with the time-space illusion that thinks otherwise. And there's a quick reference here that I don't want you to miss because it's not spoken about often. But what part of your mind are you learning from this week? And as we come together in these meetings to read the Course in Miracles and to understand these things, what part of your mind is doing the learning? Certainly not the part that already understands and knows, because why would it need to learn something it already knows? It's the part of your mind that is learning through the ego is the part that needs healing. And so I don't want to discourage anybody, but this was a shock to me, is the part of my consciousness that is participating in this program in a way of applying myself and effort and trying and all those things, noticing things new, is my ego is doing the learning. And I wasn't prepared for that. So this will be talked about more in chapter 31, where we start to undo the multiple versions of ourself. We'll talk about it in other chapters, but it really covered strongly in the last two chapters, where you realize that there's multiple selves vying for the center of the stage of your consciousness. There's your holy self, which is quiet and gentle and not forceful and will wait patiently. And then there's your ego, rebellious ego self, that will go along for the ride in an attempt to detour you along the way. And then there's the part of yourself that's in the middle ground that thinks that is still confused about your true identity. So we will pick all that up later on, and I'm sorry if I dragged you through this prematurely. Susie?
I mean, this first paragraph is amazing because it's the ego. You know, it's, if I'm giving something, I want something back, and I want something back, and we're not equal. And this is certainly not to give and receive as one in truth. So that just totally jumped out at me. That is because he thinks he is giving something to them and is not receiving something equally desirable in return. I mean, you know, it couldn't be more clear to me as I read this now. And that would be a very unhealed part of me,
Yes.
you know, and operating from my ego.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and contrasting that, working through spirit, an individual working through spirit celebrates the healing of the other person as if it's their own, rejoices with them, is equally blessed. Richard?
Yeah, yeah, I have a question, and it relates to what we were talking about. This is a great lesson, and I feel the healing. And then something comes up where I only had one parent, and they were very sick, and it's hard for me to love that parent when I know that they were sick and were out to hurt people, including children, myself. How do I switch that without getting sucked in or old stuff coming up? I know there's an answer here, and I'm taking a chance by asking it
Mhm.
and revealing.
Mhm.
But this would be a growing point for me, emotionally and psychologically.
Right, right.
So,
One, Richard, because of the nature of your question, thank you for that and for your vulnerability there. I would prefer not to give a short snap response and would prefer to talk with you about it when we have time. We could be at the end of class today. In general, we deal with that relationship the same way, and I'm talking about Course in Miracles, the same way we deal with all other relationships. We be willing to lay it aside so that we might move forward. And it's our shifting of the investment of our faith and our attention from what we would call the past into the present gift that the Holy Spirit has for us. It's a conscious choice to shift in the direction of healing, knowing that to remain looped in the past is only to tie us down. And so theoretically, we can describe it much more easier than one can usually practice it and apply it. And that's why I'd like to talk to you about it afterwards in detail.
thank you. Looking forward to it.
You're welcome. Okay, we need to go on. I want to make sure we finish as close as I can on time here.
When you heal, that is exactly what you are learning. You are recognizing the changeless mind in your brother by realizing that he could not have changed his mind. That is how you perceive the Holy Spirit in him. It is only the Holy Spirit in him that never changes his mind. He himself may think he can, or he would not perceive himself as sick. He therefore does not know what his self is. If you see only the changeless in him, and you have not really changed him. By changing your mind about his for him, you help him undo the change his ego thinks it has made in him.
I really love this. It's very transpersonal, where so transpersonal may not be familiar or terminology. It's not found in the Course of Miracles. It came on board largely later on, where it's transpersonal is a recognition that we are all equals, and therefore when healing occurs, we are all healed together. It says it right here in the first line. When you heal, that is exactly what you are learning, is that you are healed. You're recognizing not that your brother was an inferior and sick and a less than, but you're acknowledging an equality with him. You're recognizing his true self. Remember, the word charity is to recognize the perfection in another before they've even recognized it in themselves. You're being charitable in that sense to them. You are perceiving the Holy Spirit in them, makes them a part of the one mind of creation in the same way that we are all part of creation. So it is a transcendent perspective that recognizes no one is really sick, confused perhaps, lacking understanding, unconscious of the truth, but not sick in the sense of inequality, deprivation, lack of love. And so you see only the changeless. You see your brother as he is in eternity, as an eternal being, a changeless being, an extension of the source of all creation. And it's a recognition, it's a conscious recognition of your relationship with the other in those terms. And it has a power in it to change the other person's mind. By changing your mind about his for him, you help him undo the change his ego thinks it has made in him. I want to make sure that's not lost on anybody. By your entering into a state of mind that we read a moment ago, that it comes from an integrated state of oneness, this state of mind, it's a gift from the Holy Spirit. A holy instant occurs. It's a shift in perception, and you see your brother as whole. And by doing that, it changes his mind for him by helping him undo any nonsense narrative that he may have subscribed to. It helps him undo that and realize that it's not true. What's true is his wholeness and his completeness. And this might sound to some like spiritual gobbledygook, but remember, we're talking about the laws of creation, the laws of mind, and the ability to change one's mind about oneself. And I would submit that Course of Miracles is a master program for that, changing one's mind about oneself. And that when you change your mind, you also develop the ability to help others change theirs as well. And the Holy Spirit says that's the reason why you're here on earth, is to change your own mind about yourself and help others change their mind about themselves. Sandra?
Yeah, and that's precisely why we're not capable of judging ourselves or anybody else. I'm complete.
That's beautiful. Did you get that? If you judge yourself, you're really operating from the error of belief that that's your role. And if you judge yourself, you also wind up, by definition, projecting those judgments outward onto others as well. So, yeah, so there are errors all along the way that we need to learn to avoid. Brian, you saw your hand up?
I hope you can hear me this time.
I can.
Good, thank you. Yeah, this whole section seems an explication of one of the principles of miracles early on in the book, that miracles supply a lack, and they are given by someone who temporarily has enough to someone who is temporarily lacking. And that's the unhealed healer who is temporarily lacking, but can get that from his brother and vice versa. And hopefully both be healed together. But I'm wondering if the whole, once a year or so, I look at those miracle principles, and then every now and then I realize, oh, okay, so those are the principles, and now the whole book is simply explaining what those are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good insight, Brian. I view it that way. The whole book is an elaboration on specific application of those principles. Very good. Thank you. All right. I'm running near the end of our time here. Julie?
As you can hear two voices, so can you see two ways. One way shows you an image or an idol that you may worship out of fear, but will never love. The other shows you only truth, which you will love because you will understand it. Understanding is appreciation, because what you understand, you can identify with. And by making it part of you, you have accepted it with love. That is how God Himself created you, in understanding, in appreciation, and in love. The ego is totally unable to understand this because it does not understand what it makes, does not appreciate it, and does not love it. It incorporates to take away. It literally believes that every time it deprives someone of something, it has increased. I have spoken often of the increase of the kingdom by your creations, which can only be created as you were. The whole glory and perfect joy that is the kingdom lies in you to give. Do you not want to give it?
So this may be one of my most favorite paragraphs in the textbook. It introduces a model which we can only touch on right now, and I'll have to go into this in more detail at another point. But it's your journey through truth, your journey back to your true self, awareness of your true self and your part in creation, unfolds in phases. It begins with understanding. It progresses to a heartfelt appreciation, so you understand in your conscious mind. And then it touches your depths of your heart and you appreciate it. And then as a result of opening your heart, you begin to identify with the truth that we all share in common. This is seen in relationship. You understand a person, you appreciate them, you come to identify with them. You think of them as a part of us. It's not like they are separate. And then and that heals right there. Then it goes into the deeper and more transcendent phases where you unite with them and ultimately come to a state of unconditional love with them. We don't have the time to elaborate more right now on those phases, but we will. This will come up again, and we'll spend some more time on it when it does.
You cannot forget the Father because I am with you, and I cannot forget him. To forget me is to forget yourself and him who created you. Our brothers are forgetful. That is why they need your remembrance of me and of him who created me. Through this remembrance, you can change their minds about themselves as I can change yours. Your mind is so powerful, a light that you can look into theirs and enlighten them, as I can enlighten yours. I do not want to share my body in communion because this is to share nothing. Would I try to share an illusion with the most holy children of a most holy Father? Yet I do want to share my mind with you because we are of one mind, and that mind is ours. See only this mind everywhere, because only this is everywhere and in everything. It is everything because it encompasses all things within itself. Blessed are you who perceive only this, because you perceive only what is true.
Mhm. So a moment ago, Brian was sharing that principle about when two people come together, one is more aware and the other is temporarily less aware of who they are. It's about forgetting. Our brothers are forgetful. That is why they need your remembrance of me and of him who created me. This is a much better, kinder, more gentle view of others in need than to view them as sick and lacking, is that they're forgetful. They've forgotten temporarily, and all they really need is someone who cares enough to take the time and gently remind them of who they are, to believe in them. And I would love to tell a story about that changed my life, maybe another time. Julie?
Come therefore unto me, and learn of the truth in you. The mind we share is shared by all our brothers, and as we see them truly, they will be healed. Let your mind shine with mine upon their minds, and by our gratitude to them, make them aware of the light in them. This light will shine back upon you and on the whole sonship, because this is your proper gift to God. He will accept it and give it to the sonship, because it is acceptable to him and therefore to his sons. This is true communion. This is true communion with the Holy Spirit, who sees the altar of God in everyone, and by bringing it to your appreciation, he calls upon you to love God and his creation. You can appreciate the sonship only as one. This is part of the law of creation and therefore governs all thought.
So David S. is a big fan of viewing this this experience we have in terms of light. And I think it's a very effective way to understand the truth. It's a light within your mind. It's not unique or to yourself or different from anybody else's light. It's about letting a light shine from your mind to others. Gratitude and appreciation are ways in which that light shines, and in so doing makes others aware of the light in them. And then this has a network effect. So the light is shining from your mind into their mind. They become aware of the light in their mind, and then it shines back on you, and it shines also on other people. By the way, when two people are really in love, oftentimes you see this, they're just shining with the light, and the people they encounter notice it too, and feel that coming from them. We're talking about a different quality here, but it's still two people that believe in the goodness of each other. So it's not altogether different from that. And so it has a network effect, and totaled up with, as the course says, if sufficient number of people follow this course, then that network effect starts to gain momentum in society, And if enough people become miracle-minded, then that becomes truly transformational. And so that's the purpose to which the Holy Spirit is dedicated. And that's the purpose to which these classes are dedicated, is to let the light shine from your mind. So much more to say. That's as far as we're going to read today. There's so much more to say. There's a richness here that goes beyond what can be contained in our time together. David, did you have a comment?
No. No.
And I just wanted to say that the material that is going to be gone over tomorrow in class, section 7.6, amazes me. Really, I think now that we've shared this material today together, yeah, I'm amazed. Well, tomorrow picks up right at this point and continues turning the light up even brighter. And it would be really great if you can find the time in your day to join us there tomorrow, or else watch the video. So thank you, Julie, for your reading. Thank you all for your questions and comments. We are on this journey together, letting our light shine. This is your gift. Wear it well. Namaste.
Thank you, Jonica. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Love
Thank
you
everyone.
all. Bye.
Bye. Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.
Good night.
Thanks for being a part of this.
Thank you, Janika.
You're welcome, Georgia.